The struggle over the land is a struggle that was started by women, because the first people of Gush Amonim were led by women who moved into this very building, and there are two amazing women here. If not for their resolve, this conference wouldn't take place, and they deserve a round of applause. It's Judith Katzever and Nadia Matar. And because it's very important for me to speak about women, there's a very important woman who came here today, Shuli Mualim. Please stand up. And she is running for a role in the Jewish home at Bayit Yehudi. And we need more women standing on the front lines to safeguard our land. And after all the greetings, let's get down to brass tacks. A person from the right, when a person from the right is interviewed in the media, the question that scares him the most is the most ultimate leftist question. After having proved that a Palestinian state would be a catastrophe and that it would only increase terror, along comes the leftist and points an accusing finger at the right-winger and asks him, so what's your solution? What is your plan? Ladies and gentlemen, everyone who's here knows there is a solution, and it is called applying sovereignty. One state for the Jewish people with an Arab minority. That is the solution this conference calls for, and don't let anyone on the right say that there is no solution. And I'll tell you more than that. Don't fall into the trap of some people on the right who are trying to say that only Area C. Area C means accepting the tradition of Oslo. Oslo said A is theirs, B is half and half, and C is ours. That's not the case. We need to demand sovereignty over all parts of Judea and Samaria, and nothing less than that. It's very important to me that we remember that after many years of fighting this difficult war in the perception of the Palestinian state led by extremists on the extreme left, and unfortunately that has seemingly become the mainstream opinion. But I have a feeling that there's something that everyone here knows, that the struggle of moving away from evil has already been won, because the Israeli people know that establishment of a Palestinian state and withdrawal from the territories and the disengagement, that we must not repeat that mistake. Where's the problem with doing good? We are now falling into a new trap. The extreme left, I have news for you, the extreme political left is dead. It was buried when Meretz got only 3 seats in the Knesset. And Talia Sasson, who tried to gain a Knesset seat for Meretz, didn't get in because they only had 3 seats. But where could we still fall into a trap? The trap of the status quo. I call it the survival trap. The approach of survival that doesn't see a vision of 20 years ahead. It only looks at the current term. And then certain people on the right say that, and they think that they are representing the will of the people, that a Palestinian state is a very bad thing, but we're afraid to annex. And so the right repeats the same mistake again and again and says, for 40 years it's been afraid of its own shadow to carry out what it says in its own platform. We have no option not to choose, not to decide on the issue of Iran, not to decide on the issue of the Tal law, and not to decide on this issue. All these issues are at the doorstep of the current leadership, and the current leadership must make an active decision, which is one of vision, not just of survival. And an act of vision says that we cannot stammer facing the world politically that it is ours, but we're afraid to apply sovereignty. If it's yours, then you register the asset in the land registry. If you don't do that, that is a declarative act of sovereignty, then you don't believe it's yours, and we believe it's ours. And that's why, for all the members of the Jabotinsky movement, when I joined the Likud and everybody sang the anthem, don't sing the song, don't turn the song, both banks of the Jordan, into don't uproot what is planted. But it's a beautiful song, but we cannot make do with just preserving that which exists now. We have to continually look forward and ask ourselves, what do we want to see in one generation's time? Do we want to see our enemies continuing on our eastern front, or do we want to see the state of Israel expanding as a democratic state that respects all its people and minorities? And if only those people in Syria had a little bit of the rights that Israeli Arabs have, for example, the right to life, which doesn't exist in most Arab countries anymore. For the large part, and that is food for thought. We must present a vision. This week, something very important happened. Our vision, which usually encounters a very difficult legal, obstacles, received very important support from the Edmund Levy report. He is a retired justice of the Supreme Court. Some people think that the report just tells us that we are not occupiers in Judea and Samaria. We knew that already. That's not new. But the report tells us that to relate to Judea and Samaria as a legitimate child, not as a wild east where some build and some don't build, some register, some don't. So this report creates a revolution in the way we are to relate to Judea and Samaria. And I say that this report ends the occupation of the Minister of Defense, as if he's the sovereign in Judea and Samaria. We want these people not to be second-class citizens, that if they want to build a porch, they need permission from the Minister of Defense. And for me, all the ministers of defense are the same thing, even if we have the most right-wing Minister of Defense tomorrow morning, because it doesn't make sense for citizens to get building permits from the Defense Ministry. Citizens should be getting their building permits from the land registry. That's how it works, and that's the revolution of the Edmund Levy report. And this week I submitted with other Knesset members, 10 of us from the coalition, a bill that would anchor this law in Israeli law, and I hope very much that this law will indeed be adopted by Israel's Knesset in the upcoming summer session. Ladies and gentlemen, we are indeed facing stormy times, and some people say to me, why are you always dealing with this matter of sovereignty? Why don't you make do with the fact that you won the main battle? There are over 300,000 Jews in Judea and Samaria. That's a fact on the ground. As Gideon Levy wrote recently in his column in Haaretz, he said, we're fighting a losing battle because the right has already won. And if Gideon Levy knows that, then we ought to know it too. The most important thing, after all, I'm a politician. I haven't come here only to present a vision. It's important to understand that the perception of the two-state solution was presented by three factors on the left: a political factor, an intellectual, spiritual factor, and the media. The political factor was Lube Eliyav from the Labour Party, and he said from the first minute after the Six-Day War that it's a catastrophe and when they have to withdraw from the territories. He was in a great minority then. Uri Avneri of Machpela and Peace Now, he said it's a great catastrophe to be in the territories. Yeshayahu Leibovich was the spiritual intellectual leader. We need those three factors today. I am willing to be the representative of the political right who's willing to take a step forward and talk about the vision. I'm not alone. Half of the Likud faction has declared in this term that we have to apply Jewish law to Judea and Samaria. Half of the Likud faction. We need to be strengthened in two areas. On the spiritual, intellectual side, all our rabbis need to call for the application of sovereignty. It's not just to say that we need to safeguard and settle the land. All the people who write, and we have a lot of writers, some are media figures, some are people who write books, intellectuals, and of many kinds, they have to speak in the language that creates delegitimacy for anyone anyone who views Jewish settlement as something that is immoral, that is occupation, because we have not occupied a foreign land. We have returned to the land of our forefathers, and there's no better place to do that than here in Hebron. This is where the monarchy of David began. This is where the settlement in Judea and Samaria began, but it's also important to remember that this is where Kalev prayed to be saved from the advice of the spies, and every generation has its spies, and every generation needs its Kalev and Yoshua. And sometimes you are a pioneer before the camp, and people aren't convinced right away, but I have a plan. I call it the Jubilee Plan. This year is the 45th anniversary since the liberation of our lands. In the Jubilee year, I hope that we will have full sovereignty in all parts of Judea and Samaria. Thank you.